All right, let's dive into one of the wildest, most spectacular visions in the entire Bible. We're talking about the cosmic drama in Revelation chapters 12 and 13. I mean, it is a truly surreal clash of monsters, celestial beings. It's the kind of stuff that has confused people for centuries. So, what on earth, or, in heaven, is actually going on here? Let's decode this cosmic war together.
The vision just drops us right into the middle of this epic conflict. And notice, this isn't just some random mythical beast. The text tells us right away who the villain is. He's the ancient source of all evil. This whole war started long before us, and we've just stumbled right onto the battlefield.
So, first on the scene, we get this glorious, absolutely radiant woman. She's literally clothed with the sun, has the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars, and yet she's in the agony of childbirth. It's this incredibly powerful but also very vulnerable image. So who is she? What does she represent?
And then the antagonist appears. A monstrous red dragon, a grotesque figure of immense power, just poised, waiting. And its goal is horrifyingly simple: destroy the woman's child the very moment it's born. The tension is just palpable.
And as if one giant dragon wasn't enough, he calls for backup. Two more beasts rise up to help him wage his war. So now we've got our full cast of strange and terrifying characters. Which brings us to the central question: what does any of this actually mean?
So the action just explodes. A war erupts in heaven, and the dragon, Satan, is defeated. He's thrown down to earth, and he is furious. He goes after the woman, but she's miraculously protected. So since he can't get to her, he turns his rage on what the text calls the rest of her offspring, specifically those who obey God's commands and hold to the testimony of Jesus.
Okay, to understand any of this, we can't just read it literally like a modern newspaper. The author, John, was using a very specific kind of symbolic language that his first-century audience would have totally recognized. So to crack this ancient code, we're going to need two master keys.
The first key is just understanding the genre. Revelation is what's called an apocalypse, which literally just means an unveiling. It wasn't meant to be some secret roadmap to the future. Think of it more like pulling back a curtain to show the heavenly perspective on the very real struggles people were facing right then and there on Earth. And the second key is the historical situation. The first Christians were living under the shadow of the colossal Roman Empire. I mean, the pressure to participate in what was called the imperial cult, basically worshiping the emperor, was immense. If you refused, you could lose your job, your reputation, maybe even your life. This is the world John is speaking into.
Okay, so with those two keys, knowing it's apocalyptic writing and knowing about the Roman imperial cult, we are ready to start decoding these characters. John is about to unmask the powers his readers were dealing with every single day.
Here's how the symbols probably map directly onto their world. The dragon, well, that's the spiritual power behind it all, Satan. The sea beast, which comes out of the sea, often a symbol for chaos or the pagan nations, that represents the brutal military and political might of the Roman Empire and its emperor. But the earth beast, now he's a bit more sneaky. He represents the local provincial elites, the ones running the economy, who made emperor worship a non-negotiable part of daily life.
And this, of course, brings us to one of the most famous and maybe most wildly misinterpreted symbols in the entire book. What is the mark of the beast, this number 666? Okay, the really crucial thing to get here is that this mark wasn't some accidental tattoo or a barcode. It symbolized an intentional act of allegiance to Rome's idolatrous system. Most scholars believe 666 is actually a numerical code, a practice called gematria for the name Nero Caesar, an emperor who was infamous for his cruelty. And symbolically, well, the number 6, repeated 3 times, is like the ultimate symbol of human imperfection, always falling short of the divine perfect number 7.
But John's vision does something even more profound than just criticize Rome. He takes this very local, first-century struggle and plugs it into a much bigger, much older story. He wants his readers to understand the true nature of the battle they're in.
I mean, the connection couldn't be clearer when he calls the dragon that ancient serpent. It's a direct callback to the Garden of Eden. John is essentially telling the churches, hey, your struggle with Rome, this isn't some new problem. It's just the latest chapter in a war that's been raging since the beginning. But he's also reminding them that the decisive battle has already been won at the cross, where Christ dealt the fatal blow.
And this brings us to this beautiful paradox. The woman and her offspring are actually the same group,
the people of God, just viewed from two different perspectives. On a spiritual level, the church is the woman, totally protected by God, ultimately safe and unreachable by the dragon. But on an earthly level, they're her offspring, physically vulnerable to the very real suffering and persecution that the beast inflicts.
So, why? Why tell this bizarre, symbolic story? What was the ultimate point for the people reading it back then? Well, it all comes down to one really powerful purpose.
The primary goal of this whole vision was not to terrify Christians with scary monsters. It was to empower them. By reframing the glorious, all-powerful Roman Empire as this grotesque, monstrous, but ultimately defeated enemy, John was giving them courage. He was handing them a whole new perspective to help them resist compromise and persevere through their suffering.
In a way, this entire vision is a story version of that famous idea. John is showing his readers that their struggle with Roman officials wasn't just about people. It was a reflection of a much deeper spiritual conflict. And in that conflict, their ultimate enemy, the dragon, had already lost.
And that really leaves us with a final question. John's apocalypse was a tool for unmasking the deceptive powers that were hiding behind the glamorous facade of Rome. So it kind of forces us to ask, what systems or powers in our own world demand our ultimate allegiance? And how does seeing the spiritual reality behind them equip us to respond with courage and faithfulness? It's something to think about.